home.
I saw that. That's how you got on my radar was all social media. You're probably way better connected in that aspect than your opponent, LaHood. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in Chicago, 42 years old, and I'm a graduate of the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, which is the military college. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army National Guard, served from 2002 to 2006. And then I've worked in digital marketing, media buying,
It shows.
advertising technology for about the past 20 years, 15 years. And I've worked in the government at the Treasury Department and the Department of Commerce, working in real estate operations, leasing, project management. And I launched this campaign to run for Congress a couple months ago. We've raised about $600, mostly through social audio, through an app called Clubhouse, which is similar to X Spaces. It's basically a Zoom conference call, essentially. Right. It's all audio. And I'm trying to defeat Darren LaHood, who I view as being a negative Republican who's created $20 trillion in debt in 10 years. So I'm fighting. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm saying I'm fighting for the people of the district in 16th district in Illinois, for the whole state of Illinois, and for MAGA and Republicans all around the United States who believe that our government is borrowing and spending way too much money, and we have to cut the spending.
That's a pretty big order because LaHood's he's going to have the Illinois GOP behind him. He'll have some federal law stuff behind him. He's going to have money to spend. Right now, you're at about $600. What's your strategy to counteract that?
It's by having conversations with you in open, frank, transparent manners. It's grassroots. And unfortunately, the algorithm doesn't favor me. It literally create as much content as you can, connect with as many people as you can, and really getting on the ground in Rockford and Peoria. The number one goal of this campaign right now is to get 1,000 signatures on our petitions.
Sure.
So I'm pretty confident over the next 3 weeks on Fridays and Saturdays in Rockford and in Peoria, we'll be able to get the number of signatures to get on the ballot in March.
Don't forget to hit the metro stations in your district. Those are great places to harvest the voters from. Let's go back to LaHood real quick. You call him a rhino, which has become almost cliche at this point. Everyone's a rhino that's running against someone else. When we look at him, though, his voting record isn't. You guys see eye to eye on some stuff. What is it you're not seeing eye to eye on him that caused you to run here?
Really, it was his COVID-19 response. If you do a cross comparison between open secrets and all the HR acts that he has voted on, it's not a 10% or an 80% correlation. It is 100% correlation between all open secrets donors and all HR acts. So there's 100% correlation between HR acts and lobbyists who are essentially paying him to vote for all these funding measures. And it started with the HEROES Act and the CARES Act. The amazing thing about Grok on X is you can use it to go through all the HR acts and identify by the largest acts and whether LaHood voted on it, and then who the Fortune 500 corporations are that receive the most amount of money through those acts. And there's 100% correlation in open secrets with all his donors. He has over $12 million or over $10 million in his campaign account. And so in my opinion, he's running a skimming operation. And this is what a lot of Congress people are doing. They have 10 to 20 to 30 million in their checking account, all given by lobbyists. So that is primarily the reason why I want to wake people up in the 16th district. Say, hey, he has created $20 trillion in debt plus $5 trillion a year over 10 years. He's responsible for spending $70 trillion. What have the people in Illinois District 16 really gotten from LaHood for all those trillions of dollars? He likes to say it's all about jobs at Caterpillar, etc. So in my opinion, he's wasting the money. We have to stop borrowing and spending. And that's why I'm running against Darren LaHood in the 16th district.
And in deference to your campaign too, some of those jobs he talks about didn't really appear. You look at what happened with Stellantis, they only got one with a fraction of those jobs coming back. So it might be good to have someone holding his feet to the fire.
It goes to show you that it is very difficult to create a successful business. I've launched many different businesses, and you can borrow from the taxpayers and create these businesses that go out of business, like Fisker and the electric buses that Pritzker gave us. So it's super hard to create a business. And when a government creates a business by borrowing and taxing, that's not the bedrock or the cornerstone for building a good business. They're set up to fail. And it puts all the debt on future taxpayers. So it's
that's not
an unfair bargain.
No. What did you do in the Army? You're in the Army National Guard. What did you do there? I know you're an officer, so it's a little different. I'm not looking for.
Sure. So I can tell you, I went to the Citadel, which is a prestigious military school in Charleston, South Carolina. And while I was there, 9/11 happened. So I joined the Army National Guard in what they call the simultaneous membership program. So I started out as a PFC, then a specialist, then a sergeant in the infantry. And so I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, practiced war fighting for 4 months in the forests of Georgia, graduated college, got commissioned in intelligence, and I worked in translations, interrogations.
Oh.
The Army is Army work. That's digging trenches, fighting, and being in cities. I didn't deploy to Afghanistan or Iraq. I was all around the United States. And then I started working in digital communications. I think from a forensic accounting standpoint, let alone just AI and the queries that I have put into Grok. If you go to my X account, it's John Kitover, Illinois, that's IL. And I will retweet some of my best Grok queries trying to untangle congressional borrowing and spending, borrowing from the Federal Reserve, really looking at our ledger books, our balance statements, and saying, you know what, guys like Darren LaHood are kicking the can down the road over and over. 10 years now. So this is my background, but I'm really trying to stop the borrowing and the spending. I think it has to become a mantra with Republicans. I'm standing with Thomas Massie, Rand Paul, Ron Paul. I supported the Ron Paul campaign from California. I have a good picture with him. And I just believe that we are digging a hole. We have to stop digging this hole of debt and borrowing and spending from the Federal Reserve. We have to cut Medicare, Medicaid. We have to cut the NDAA. And I think we can preserve Social Security, but cutting the military industrial complex and big pharma are the #2 priorities of my campaign. So that means Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, AstraZeneca, the hundreds of billions of dollars in tax credits that they got from the big beautiful bill, $500 billion a year from taxpayers in tax credits. That is the primary focus of my campaign.
You segued exactly where I want to go. I was just going to ask you about the big beautiful bill. That was a huge expansion of spending. So I think you pretty much told us where you stand on that. You weren't exactly pro big beautiful bill then.
We can kill the 2 biggest problems in our society, which is the military industrial complex and big pharma. We have to cut the Medicare and Medicaid by probably $1 billion to $2 billion a year, and the National Defense Authorization Act by about $200 to $400 billion a year. We'll be able to start paying down the debt. We can lower taxes, and we can stop funding big pharma, which is poisoning us, and the military industrial complex, which is taxing us and doing military policing around the world. And Darren LaHood has kicked the can and funded this for 10 years. He's been a congressman in the 16th district, and I think the connecting district before redistricting. But he is a can kicker. I'm going to crush his can, and I'm going to recycle it for the American people and for the people in the state of Illinois.
Let's talk about vaccinations. I'm not real clear on where you are on vaccinations, as far as if it's just a COVID vaccine or if what's your stand on other vaccines?
Let me just start with COVID-19 and that vaccine response. The HEROES Act in March of 2020 was the first $1 trillion tranche or omnibus bill that Darren LaHood voted for. And that is the start of it. That's when Pfizer was able to print up 30 billion cocktails. A lot of these vaccines were manufactured in India because it was a patent and it was mass produced around the world.
Yeah.
That's not variable medicine. That's giving one solution to everybody for a problem that Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates and the World Health Organization cooked up in Wuhan, China. So to just immediately go to the 72 vaccine schedule that young people have to take, we're living in a vaccine industrial complex. It's not a vaccine diet. This is not acute targeted medicine. This isn't variable. This morning on X, we read through MAHA and the February 18-page PDF that was put out by Secretary Kennedy and the NIH. And I think right now, Big Pharma and Kennedy are still colliding, and the gold standard in scientific research has yet to really been proven. I think we're still very much living in a big pharma, big medical industrial complex, which demands the money. And so again, cutting Medicare and Medicaid will choke big pharma And I think it'll improve our health outcomes. I'm not a fan of all these vaccinations. It's out of control. But why does a 3-year-old need 72 injections? Can you explain that, George? It's insane what we're living with.
I am a nurse, so I can't explain it. These are all diseases we're trying to keep that 3-year-old from having. My grandkids are getting vaccinated now. My children got vaccinated. We had no health problems from those vaccines. I can see why people are upset on the COVID vaccine, because it was, again, I said I was a nurse. One thing we were taught is always the patient's choice, whether they take a medicine or they don't. They had COVID jammed down their throat. So I get the anger there. But I never really quite, and yeah, I go back as a conservative a long way. I'm almost 60 now. I never ran for Congress. I was a city councilman, though, in Georgia. So I've been involved in Republican politics for a long time. I don't think anyone would say anything other than a conservative. But the things like eliminating smallpox have gone a long way. We couldn't do that without those vaccines. The chicken pox, people live through that. My grandkids are getting them. I believe my kids are getting them the chicken pox one. I don't think it's hurting anyone. It's keeping them from scarring and later and protecting them from shingles a little bit later. But
I would just say that I've seen documentation from the George Bush administration that suggests that Operation Warp Speed was long in the making. I think this is the pandemic, scamdemic, plandemic. I don't trust it. The lockdowns, the baby diaper masks. People are very angry still. And when you bring up COVID-19 vaccines and the lockdown, Darren LaHood told his constituents via X, if you don't take this injection, this pandemic will never end. You have to get vaccinated. Otherwise, you'll never be able to go back to work. That's the type of messaging he put out on his X account. You can search it. Just go to Darren LaHood's X account, type in vaccine, and see what he told everybody. He was doing propaganda messaging, pushing out big pharma talking points. That's not leadership. That's doing what your lobbyist, multi-million-dollar contributors tell you to do. And he's telling everybody on his X account, his Facebook account with 27,000 followers. In my opinion, he's pushing propaganda, and he voted for it. And he took out he took out trillions of loans on your behalf to fund this. We're $37 trillion in debt. And we have $100 trillion in unfunded debt liabilities. That's a total of $137 trillion. So everybody in this country owes over $100,000 right now to the federal government and the balance sheet. And Darren LaHood doesn't talk about it. All he talks about is how the big, beautiful bill is so beautiful. It's not beautiful. It's taxation by loading it on the back end. So in my opinion, he is not leading the people in his district, and he's a failure as a congressional representative in the 16th district. In Illinois, he's just a can kicker. And I just want to reiterate, everyone has to chant the mantra, stop borrowing, stop spending.
That is good to hear Cam to say, because we go back into what some people call the bipartisan combine. Everyone's just taxing and spending. There really has not been a responsible financial party for a very long time. And it's good to hear people coming up through the ranks and running for office saying, yeah, we got to stop this, because it's not sustainable. You're absolutely right on that. I'm curious too. You went right for a congressional seat. Generally, people coming up to the ranks will say, "Oh, you're going to start a city council, and you'll start at the county board, you'll start at the township level." You went right for Congress. Mostly, it seems to be because the job there LaHood's doing. Did you have any thought about starting lower and working up, or was this just your passion about ending LaHood's reign in Congress?
Let me just say, this is not the second time I've run for politics. I ran for committee person here in the 45th Ward in Chicago, and that is what created this rocket that is trying to defeat Darren LaHood, because that experience of dealing with all kinds of low-down, dirty, grimy local politicians and the lawyers and let me just describe to you what happened. So I ran for committee person. I spent about 45 days at the Jefferson Park Blue Line stop. I hired people off of Craigslist. We gathered about 800 signatures. Every single signature was challenged by the Chicago GOP. We were about 60 signatures short. But I filed an appeal. I had to go downtown, go through the election courts, had about 2 trials. The challenger, Estella Richards, the 45th Ward committee woman, never showed up. She couldn't provide any testimony, wouldn't provide any testimony in terms of questioning. So in my opinion, my constitutional rights were denied me, and this deals with ballot access.
Right.
I have no doubt that this time going around, we will get the total number of signatures to actually be on the ballot. It's less than 700.
Right.
And let me tell you, when you file for Congress, it only takes you 15 minutes to file. So my question is, where are the patriots and the Republicans in Peoria and Rockford that want to stand up to all this borrowing and spending? Where are the libertarians even that are not stepping up to the plate? A lot of people aren't getting anything for their vote, but they're still going to vote for Darren LaHood.
Yeah.
So this is why I decided to run for Congress, because the issue is that important, that this is not just whether or not I win or get on the ballot. This is about creating communication to as many people as possible to recite the mantra: stop borrowing, stop spending. Every single year, we're borrowing $2 trillion and only taking in $5 trillion. So this is why I'm running and why we have to defeat Darren LaHood in Illinois 16.
This is the old Illinois GOP mantra. It's not your turn yet, right? This is why no one's running, because they go up to their county GOP and they're told it's not your turn. Or in your case, I'm sure you have been told, start smaller, start at the township level, start this. Of course, the Chicago GOP is so completely dysfunctional. Maybe they didn't tell you that, but this is the same thing I hear over and over again as I talk to candidates. They're being told it's not your turn.
Listen, it's everybody's turn. There should be 100 people lining up when there's no filing fee and it takes you 15 minutes. And now there's another Republican candidate running, and I think there's 4 Democrats running against Darren LaHood. So people are waking up and standing up. Darren LaHood really flies under the radar, but he has a very powerful position in Congress. So in my opinion, the more people standing up to Darren LaHood, either we force him to start obeying our Constitution and give us a fair and balanced budget, or he's just going to keep plunging us into debt and creating future tax liabilities for your children. The guy is, in my opinion, dishonest, and I think we have to crush his can that he keeps kicking.
Let's switch up for a little bit. Let's talk about the district you're running for. Your district you're in Chicago, it's in Peoria, it's in Rockford. Let's talk gerrymandering. Where's our solution here? Right now, the Republicans, we're roughly half the state's electorate. We only have 3 congressional seats, one the ones you're running for. Was there hope here? What's the answer here? As long as you're that outnumbered, how do we fix this?
Let me tell you, before working at the Treasury Department doing facilities management, I worked at the Census Bureau downtown Chicago. So I was opening and closing census offices, and it's a lot of work to open a census office to gather that data. And that is the only agency in our Constitution. All these other agencies are not there. The census is the only one that should technically be funded. Most of these other agencies, I think we could eliminate a large percentage of them. These are the top towns in the 16th district, and these are the towns that are voting for Darren LaHood. It's Rockford, which has 148,000 people. Right. Peoria has 113,000. Bloomington, 78,000. Normal, 52,000. Pekin, 31,000. Belvedere, 25,000. Loves Park, 23,000. I could go on and on. There's a lot of cities. The way to really deal with this gerrymandering and all this insane districting, when you see the map, it looks like this crazy jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
So from my experiences working at the census and hearing and listening and working with higher ups, there's a lot of corruption when it comes to this districting and the Census Bureau itself. So I think the Trump administration has put forth a bill saying that illegal aliens will no longer be allowed in the districting maps. So there's a lot of ways to clear it up. And the number way to clear up all these problems is transparency.
Right.
And actually having access to the data that the Commerce Department puts out and what the legislature is using here in the state of Illinois. But running for Congress, I'm looking at bigger issues than just districting here. I'm looking at the national debt, which could sink this ship that we are all on. Illinois is in a fiscal crisis. Chicago's in a fiscal crisis.
Yeah.
Illinois has $200 billion in debt and $60 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. My father is a retired Chicago police officer. And in my opinion, Chicago and Illinois are being run like Clown Town. This is clown world we're living in. People aren't transparent. All they want to do is racial identity politics, and we're not being fiscally conservative. This is my biggest gripe that Elon Musk helped expose, which is through Doge. If you look at all the screenshots on the Doge X account, it's all for DEI and climate change education. Hundreds of billions of dollars in education grants. Northwestern isn't getting, I think, $500 million? All of these huge institutions that have huge endowments, why is the federal government funding all of this? We're $37 trillion in debt. So again, I want to reiterate the mantra: stop borrowing, stop spending.
They're funding it because the Democrats are in charge. This is how you make more Democrats, right? You turn the schools into your propaganda mills. And not saying Northwestern is an excellent school, you wouldn't get an excellent education there, but it's also turned out a lot of excellent socialists and communists over the last 20 years. And that's why that's happening.
They're winning, George. They're winning, and they're in control of our money. Illinois is a Democrat industrial complex. I have a book over here from the Democratic Party in the 1950s. They don't look like that today. They are so unprofessional and so Marxist and so radical. The stuff that comes out of Chicago politics is absolutely deranged. The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, he said just the other day that white structural racism and supremacy is the blame for the 600 deaths during the heat wave in 1997. You know, what does that have to do with the debt and the deficits? Chicago Public Schools has what, 107 or $715 million deficit or something. So the point is, they're not talking. I want accountants and forensic accountants and people, financially minded people running the government, not the insane political spam that they spew every single day. Darren LaHood does it the same way, but in a different way. He takes photos with veterans, takes photos with the police. You know, his dad, Ray LaHood, is an Obama transportation secretary.
Right.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And in my opinion, Obama is the worst president this country has ever had. There's other things about Ray LaHood that people shouldn't forget. That he had $50,000 in cash that some Nigerian scammer gave him that the FBI investigated, and the FBI took Darren LaHood's laptop. So this is a very politically connected family, a very powerful family. And I need this video to hopefully go viral so people can donate to this campaign to defeat Darren LaHood, because he's going to keep kicking the can and create $2 trillion a year every single term he gets. So if you want to stop the borrowing and spending with me, go to johnforcongress.com. You can text the campaign directly at 312-498-0517. And on johnforcongress.com, click on the blog section. You can see our antidote link to make a donation. I'll update the site after this interview, because hopefully I'll push it out and we'll get a lot of views and raise more money, because I live in Chicago in the Northwest side. I'm going to drive up to Rockford. I'm going to drive to Peoria. I'm going to drive to Bloomington and Normal, Illinois, and I hope to meet people in the streets or at the bars or at the train stops who have watched this video and want to sign on the petition to defeat Darren LaHood.
Your district is frankly crazy too, the way they drew that up. And again, it's another way to, it's all about suppressing Republican vote. And so you wonder why people aren't lining up to run for it. Who wants to drive from Chicago to Rockford, Peoria every weekend, which is where you're at, right? You've got to reach out, you got to knock on doors, you got to talk to people, and they put you in a position where it's almost impossible to cover the ground you need to cover to actually win this thing.
It's not that many signatures, so I'm not stressed out about it. To become a committee person in the Chicago GOP, it's the same number of signatures as it is to become a congressperson.
Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous too.
It's insane. And I think there's a lot of Republicans, and this is the interesting thing. If you go to Darren LaHood's X account and you look at the comments section, it's nothing but hate for Darren LaHood. And I know a lot of it is probably liberal Democrats replying, but there are a lot of Republicans that are sick of the borrowing and spending.
That's the frustrating part of our demographic, I think. Like I said, this is something that we talk about a lot, but don't act on it. When we do act on it, going back to the big, beautiful bill, there are good things or there are bad things. The debt we're taking on clearly is the bad thing. Let's talk about, or let's go back and talk about something we're talking about too, and that's their identity-based politics and everything, and the amount of hatred there is out there now. What do you think the answer is there? How do we bring not just Republicans back into the fold that may have left because of things like the deficit, but also bring Democrats around to thinking where they're a loyal opposition again, as opposed to just crazy race-baiting lunatics that they're out for blood and hate the president. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of logic to what we're doing. How do we fix this?
I hope you get a chuckle out of my response here. So I would just ask for a moment of silence and stillness and take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for 10 seconds. It's wisdom and education. So I think I've spent a lot of time doing a lot of yoga, reading a lot of books, going to the gym. For me, preparing for this moment, it's the now. So I feel like my whole life, the destiny has led up to running against Darren LaHood in the 16th district. And to me, all the racial identity politics, there's a lot of ways to be political. I would say that the debt, the national debt, is a way to be political. Vaccines are a way to be political. Abortion is a way to be political. I can name 10 to 100 other ways that one can be political. And so really, to me, it's wisdom education, reading scripture, reading sacred texts that point out eternal truths, universal truths amongst all of us. So when somebody does a racial identity political attack or brings it up in the discourse, I just consider it spam and political. If I was to pull out my Bible flashcards here and read you a bunch of sacred scripture, you could say that's being political, but I would also add that it's education in terms of wisdom. That is the only real true response I have to people who want to do racial identity politics.
All right, so you touched on your big issues are the immunizations and the budget. What else would your term in Congress focus on outside of those two issues?
I meditated on this. If you were the leader of a tribe, what would you want for the people in your tribe? Or if you're a congressperson or a president or the leader of a business, it's primarily, you do not see in Darren LaHood's X account, he never talks about his constituents' property taxes. He doesn't talk about their income taxes. He talks about, hey, I don't want you to be able to file for free with the IRS, so I'm going to get rid of that so H&R Block and Tax Pro can keep charging you another $200 to $300 a year to file. So this is the issue, is lowering Illinois and District 16 property taxes, lowering their income taxes, and lowering their public debt and their private debt. Those would be four issues that I would want to look out for if I was the leader of the 16th district as a congressperson in terms of legislation. Again, I want to lower your property taxes, lower your income taxes, lower your public debt, which is the national debt at $37 trillion, as well as the state of Illinois, and also lower your private debt. Now, if that means lowered interest rates, that means asking Chairman Powell politely to lower the rate from 4 to 7% down to 1%.
Yeah.
So it's all artificial. We're doing it to ourselves. We're stressing ourselves out. We're stressing, the system is stressed out, and therefore we are going to be more stressed out. But a lot of this is of our own making, and we are our own worst enemy. Again, Darren LaHood voted for the HEROES Act, the CARES Act. I could read them to you from my ex right now. I wanted to come more prepared with a lot more grok data. But if you go to John Kitover, Illinois, I will re-query and create more queries that I hope people who watch this video will go to John Kitover IL on X, follow me, and you can see a lot of these queries, which is really just forensic accounting and data analytics of the Treasury.gov app. So Thomas Massey has a lapel that says 37 trillion. That data from his Wi-Fi lapel comes from Treasury.gov, straight from the Treasury API. So if you go to usdebtclock.org, they use a different API, but nonetheless, you can get a better picture of the financial balance sheet of the United States of America. And so when Darren LaHood, through the Big Beautiful Bill Act, gives the Fortune 500 $500 billion a year in tax credits, that's all future tax liabilities for you. It's transferring it from the Fortune 500 to we the people. That's not why you're voting for Darren LaHood, is it? I hope it's not, because if you are, you're voting for your own demise. We're giving ourselves away. The Declaration of Independence says they are eating out our substance. And in my opinion, Darren LaHood is eating out the substance of America and the people in the 16th district. And Illinois politics is so corrupt and the people are so sleazy. It's taking a grassroots effort of a guy in Jefferson Park in the northwest side of Chicago to say no more borrowing and spending.
You talked about cuts. There are two you mentioned that I was specifically interested in. Cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. That's not going to go with the older people on Medicaid, the older voter. And you also talked to cuts on defense. You talked about $400 million in cuts in defense.
$400 billion.
$4 billion, yeah. Where do you see these cuts coming from? What are we cutting to come up with these numbers?
So Medicare, Medicaid, the average amount per citizen spent is about $15,000 to $18,000. That money is going to health insurance and to large hospital providers and to administrative expenses like doctor salaries, nurse salaries, et cetera. That's almost $20,000 a person. And if you have advanced diseases and you're on 30 prescriptions, now you're talking about $60,000 a year or $160,000 a year. The point is, we have to take these two snakes that are drowning this nation in debt, big pharma and health insurance and the military industrial complex. We have to start choking these two snakes. Otherwise, the whole ship is going to sink into hyperinflation. By 2050, the United States government will be paying $4 trillion a year in interest on the national debt. And we're only taking in $5 trillion a year because of these two snakes. You could look at it like the rod of Caduceus. You're a nurse, you've seen that symbol. These are the two snakes choking our livelihood in this country. Everybody is on the hook for this money, but we keep kicking the can down the road. So we have to stop borrowing and stop spending.
But where are these cuts coming from? So you want to cut the fence? We're deployed all over the world. You're a veteran too. I'd hate to. My son's in the Marine Corps. I served in the Marine Corps. I'd hate to see cuts that are going to endanger the people that are out there protecting us. And like I said, as far as Medicare cuts go, you got an uphill battle on that one because half the people are going to vote for you aren't going to like that. So what are you cutting there?
I just want to reiterate, my economic philosophical position deals with transparency and shedding light on the problems. We have to set priorities. If we want to have a lethal fighting force that is capable of going anywhere in the world to destroy our enemy who may commit terror against us, we have to set priorities. And if that means decommissioning or not building the next generation of aircraft carriers or fighter jets, we have to remember priorities. And if that means Fortune 500 corps aren't, a lot of this is going to crush the stock market. I don't want to take the oil out of the engine. I want to essentially optimize the oil that we're using. We have to optimize our spend. This is like a game. This is essentially game theory. And unfortunately, we are at 40% of our economy is all based on borrowed money, borrowing and spending. That's not an authentic, transparent economy. So the sooner we actually get real and stop being children and say, hey, okay, a lot of this net profit is just because Congress is borrowing and spending through HR acts and the Federal Reserve. Chairman Powell said, we don't ask Congress for monetary advice and we don't give fiscal advice. Whatever Congress does is a given and we put it in our models. What kind of leadership response is that from the head of the Federal Reserve? Let's set some priorities and say, you know what? We have to optimize and be effective in our deployment of spending. It's the way a business runs. When I was at the Treasury Department, I asked the senior leader, I said, are we allocating spending to locations where we know we're going to get a better ROI? Why are we building all these new offices if this area of the country has no good GDP? We need to go where, if you're going to tax, go where the money is. It doesn't matter. We just got to spend and we got to spend. That's how they act. There's no optimization of our game theory as an economy. It's unpatriotic, and we're already $37 trillion in debt. Back in 2001, when 9/11 kicked off, we had $2 trillion in debt. That's manageable. $37 trillion is a crisis, and Chairman Powell says it's totally unsustainable. And in fact, he did a Freudian slip, and he said it's unsustainable at the moment. And we're approaching that level where if Congress doesn't wise up and people don't start following Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, a lot of other Republicans in the Liberty Caucus, and a lot of libertarians are still very vocal about this, but you will not see Darren LaHood come on your podcast or ever put out any messaging about the national debt. He does not want you thinking about it.
Let's close on the Social Security. Also unsustainable. So I call it a pyramid scheme. Any efforts to privatize any of it have always failed. How do we fix that? Because whatever we wind up doing, if you're in Congress, there's a chance this is going to start to collapse on you. So what are your thoughts on that?
So some people might not like this response because maybe it's not fiscally conservative enough, but Social Security is it's the second largest line item.
Yeah.
I want to keep it 100% intact, but I want, as Doge did, eliminate all the fraud, waste, and abuse in it, especially international fraud. There's still probably a lot of international schemers and scammers ripping that system off. But again, if you look at the snake analogy of Medicare, Medicaid, the medical industrial complex, and the National Defense Authorization Act, and our military industrial complex, the middle pillar is really us. It is our Social Security. So let's actually just enhance the program. If we take away from big military and big pharma, we can increase payouts to Social Security recipients who at this point are 100% involved in a Ponzi scheme. We're $37 trillion in debt, and we're paying over $1 trillion a year in interest to service that debt. Essentially, we have a $37 trillion mortgage that costs us $1 trillion a year. And every year we keep adding $2 trillion to the 37 trillion.
Right.
So again, we have to start making cuts and we have to start paying down the debt. But I say preserve Social Security, because that Ponzi scheme, you paid into it. Plus, you got to pay income taxes on the money you already paid in.
Right.
So you're double taxed, triple taxed. You're taxed from every degree of reality. And that is not the way America was set up to be. We need to maximize liberty, maximize our freedom, and be fiscally conservative. We've gone through a 25-year war and then a big pandemic scamdemic. After periods of warfare, you practice austerity. So this isn't a debt derangement syndrome rant. This is an American austerity syndrome that people need to start getting infected with, because if you're not part of the problem, you are literally plunging your children into forever debt. There's not going to be some debt jubilee. There's not going to be some meeting of the minds. This is a comprehensive financial system that doesn't forgive debt at the national levels. We owe this to China, Japan, the UK. We owe it to the Federal Reserve. So until people start repeating my mantra, stop borrowing, stop spending, and vote for John Kitover in the 16th district. Do not let Darren LaHood kick this can down the road any further. Hold him accountable. Demand a town hall and let him know your feelings about the COVID-19 mass vaccination, about the national debt. Let him know how you really feel about how he's representing you, and if he actually has your best interest at heart, or he has him and his own family's best interest at heart. He's got over $10 million in his campaign checking account from Blue Cross Blue Shield, from Caterpillar, from Moderna, Pfizer, J&J, Comcast, Verizon, AT&T. Everybody has given to Darren LaHood. And the last thing I want to say is LaHood gave us the Broadband Act, which is a $65 billion giveaway to Comcast, AT&T, Verizon. I want to hear one person in the 16th district that has ever gotten high-speed internet that they didn't already have it before, and that Darren LaHood didn't just give you a pile of debt and taxes on the back end.
I would say you're going to be hard for us to find that person. I think we were pretty okay on broadband by the time, in this area, at least by the time that happened. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was John Kitover, congressional candidate. I had a great time talking to him today. We'll have you back as you pass the primary. Good luck on your petitions. And what do you want to say on the way out? What's your elevator pitch to our watchers?
If you live in Rockford, if you live in Peoria, if you live in Bloomington, Normal, Pekin, Belvedere, Loves Park, Mackenzie Park, East Peoria, Morton, Washington, Dixon, Morris, Shanahan, Streeter, Pontiac, Roscoe, Harvard, Rochelle, South Beloit, or Rockton, go to johnforcongress.com. That's with a 4, or text the campaign at 312-498-0517. That's 312-498-0517. Or go to johnforcongress.com. I need your campaign contributions so I can get on the road, come to your town, shake your hand, get your signature on our petition. And we have to get 1,000 signatures within the next 2 weeks. And I hope that this video goes viral. I will push it out across all my platforms. And I'm also going to take our campaign contributions that we've raised, and I'm going to run this video as an advertisement in your town, in Rockford, in Peoria, through Google, YouTube. So if you want to donate, you want this message of liberty and fiscal conservatism and anti-mRNA spike proteins in you every single turn, that Bill Gates wants you to eat spike proteins, basically. So I'm trying to mix in a little comedy, but I hope people are resonating with the message that we have to stop borrowing and spending. It's what's causing all of these problems. And we're $37 trillion in debt. We have a $37 trillion mortgage with a $1 trillion annual interest payment. You didn't sign up for that when you voted for Darren LaHood, and he's going to keep giving it to you. So I need your help. I need your support. Go to johnforcongress.com. Thanks, George.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll cut it here. Send me all your social accounts. We'll put it in the show notes and everything so people can see it. And they'll try to have this out. Today's what, Tuesday? They'll try to have it out by Friday. All right?
Okay, God bless, George. I really appreciate you. I'm so happy that you're so well organized and helped me create this message. God bless you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Welcome to In Conversation with David Frum. I'm your host, Sean Spear, editor-at-large at The Hub. I'm grateful to be back in conversation with David for another installment of our bi-weekly video and podcast series on the key issues concerning Canadian policy and politics. In the first half of today's show, free for all listeners and viewers, we'll discuss President Trump's gathering of European leaders in the Oval Office and its significance for the war in Ukraine and America's relationship to the world more broadly. On the second half of the show, exclusive for the Hub's Heroes and Fellows, we're going to talk about some of the nascent signs of the harms of Trump's tariffs on the Canada-U.S. economic relationship, including perhaps somewhat counterintuitively rising unemployment in Las Vegas. David, thanks for joining us as always.
Thank you.
We have to talk about this major meeting of European leaders in Washington this week. What, in your view, was the significance of the meeting and the group of leaders, including President Zelensky, traveling to Washington together on the Ukraine file? What's your mental model for thinking about it?
I think you should see this as a massive vote of non-confidence in the Trump administration's leadership by all the NATO European allies. President Trump arranged this meeting in Alaska with Vladimir Putin, which was a shocking meeting in so many ways. It's shocking in that there's supposed to be diplomatic isolation of Putin to punish him for his atrocities in Ukraine. When the United States president and the Russian leader meet for face-to-face, the rule of thumb has always been they meet in a third country unless relations are unusually warm. That inviting a Russian leader to American soil is a sign of friendliness and warmth and things going well. So it's an extra honor that was remarkable. Having it on soil that Russian chauvinist nationalists claim is properly theirs is even more outrageous. And then finally, there was no staff work, there was no preparation, and Trump emerged from the meeting repeating Russian propaganda about Ukraine more abjectly and dogmatically and robotically than ever. Vladimir Zelensky had asked to be present. He'd asked for a briefing afterwards. Instead, he got a summons to Washington. European leaders, remembering what happened the last time Zelensky was summoned to Washington, arrived in a phalanx to say, we are here as a body because we don't trust you. We think you are going to repeat Russian propaganda at our friend, our ally, Zelensky, and we are here to protect him from the supposed and former leader of NATO, you. We have seen in the time since that meeting, the Trump administration is indeed following ever more the Russian line. It was as if Vladimir Putin's brain hold on Trump had weakened a little bit, so he needed to get there in person to reassert his dominance over Trump. That dominance having been reasserted, we have this big rift in NATO, which is, should Ukraine be abandoned? Should it be carved up? Should defensive installations be given away? It is fraught, and it is a visible demonstration of the lack of confidence and the justified lack of confidence in American leadership under Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way to think about the meeting. How should we think, David, about the meeting's outcomes?
Well, I think there's a lot we don't know. The Russians have a series of demands on Ukraine, including the demand of the handover of a fortified belt that they have not been able to defeat. When people, you can't compare this exactly to Yalta or to Munich, but one of the things that is kind of a tingling reminiscent of Munich was the reason Hitler wanted the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, as it then was in 1938-39, was not just that he wanted to carve up Czechoslovakia, but the Sudetenland was where the Czech fortifications against Germany were. So when you handed over the Sudetenland, you left the rest of Czechoslovakia absolutely defenseless against Nazi Germany. And in the same way, Putin is demanding the areas the Ukrainians have fortified and reinforced against him. He wants them handed over. He's also making all kinds of other demands: no foreign assistance to Ukraine, the vulnerability of Ukraine. What this has always been about is, will Ukraine retain its national independence or not? And Trump, and even more his vice president, are repeating the Putin line, and that's where we are. We have not yet seen actual concessions to the Russians yet, but the United States continues, and the United States apparently continues to sell weapons to the Europeans to give to the Ukrainians. Trump claims he's adding a 10% markup, which, if true, is appalling. And it's also worth remembering that while the United States Senate is considering an aid measure of its own to Ukraine, that measure is $800 million. To put that in context, That's 4/5 of what the United States government is going to spend to fix up the bribe or the gift from the Emir of Qatar to Donald Trump personally for him to take away from the White House with him for his use after he ceases to be president. So 800 million for Ukraine, $1 billion to sweeten up the gift from Qatar.
As you say, David, there's still a lot we don't know about the consequences of this meeting, but there are reports that Trump has ruled out U.S. ground troops, but left the door open to air support for a European European-led peacekeeping mission. How should we understand that? Is that a meaningful win for Ukraine and Europe, or simply the least bad option given Trump's instincts?
I really think that the way we report on this needs a big cold glass of ice water in the face after this meeting. So,
did you know you could save with GoodRx even if you have insurance?
I'm on Medicare. I check GoodRx because I can beat my copay. Who wouldn't like that?
Even if you have insurance, GoodRx can help you save. Another good reason to check GoodRx.
Got safety protocols? Grainger has the safety pros to call. Shop our vast inventory of safety products at Grainger.com. Call, click, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
look, what is going, but the Trump-Putin relationship is so alarming that we actually find ourselves in the Western world unable to face it. And so we, the policy community, the media community, we are suckers for any indication that things are maybe a little less terrible than they look. And so Trump will say, he'll read a letter from Melania about how the Russians shouldn't kill children. And people will say, this is a pivot. He will say, I'm leaving the door open. That's not doing it. That's simply saying all the other terrible things I'm saying. Here's one thing I am not saying. That doesn't mean there's any real help. So when you said, so he said, no. Then the question is asked about air support. And he says, I'll think about it. We'll think about it very strongly. We'll think about it. We'll give you an answer in 2 weeks, all of his usual dodges. But people need to understand, we need to face the reality here, which is that the United States under Trump is moving into alliance with Russia to carve up Ukraine. And the restraint is the diplomatic one of these protests by the European allies. And maybe they will prevail. But if they prevail, it will not be because Donald Trump had some second thought or there's some part of him that is playing this both ways. He is playing this one way and one way only.
David, I want to read something to you on this broad subject because it had me thinking this week. I entered the world of conservatism broadly defined in the early to mid 1990s as a young person. And at that time, there was pretty broad consensus in conservative circles about the Soviet Union and indeed Russia. And although we've talked about it in the past, I'm still struck by the extent to which people in and around the president, including, of course, Vice President J.D. Vance, are inclined to side with Russia over Ukraine in these circumstances. I saw something from former conservative foreign affairs minister in Canada, Maxime Bernier, who posted on X, the West must realize that Russia won the war. This war would have certainly not happened if Russia had been guaranteed that Ukraine would not join NATO. Canada should never have participated in this war. For lasting peace, Ukraine must be neutral, and Russia must be able to keep the conquered territories, unquote. Help our audience members understand how and where these ideas manage to infiltrate North American conservatism.
Well, a point to Bernier for using the phrase conquered territories. That is a little touch of reality, and in whatever dark cave Bernier has locked his brain, it's good to see that little chink of sunlight reaching him. That yes, these are conquered territories, invaded territories.
Yes.
The why of why more and more important voices in North American conservatism have ended up here, including to the point where there are some of the most you'll now hear on important right-wing podcasts that it was a mistake that the United States entered the Second World War against Hitler, that it should have been on the other side. This is, as they defend Putin, they show that the parallelism by also rehabilitating the Third Reich. I wrote an article, now it's down nearly 25 years ago, called "Unpatriotic Conservatives" in National Review.
Yes.
And it's like, of all the things I've done, it's one of the most long lasting because the people I wrote about are still mad about it. And if you follow the rule that Bill Clinton used to enunciate, a hit dog will holler, the fact that they're still hollering a quarter of a century later is interesting. And the thesis of that article was, as certain segments of the right lost faith in their own society, as they lost their belief in the vitality and dynamism of North America with all of its, racial mixing, multi-ethnic, multicultural, as they hated that they invented this utopia in much the same way that the communists of the 1930s invented an imaginary workers' paradise in the Soviet Union. So they've invented an imaginary white man's paradise in post-Soviet Russia. Now, it's not true.
Yes.
Even if what you want is a white man's paradise, Russia is not it. The white men of Russia are dying of cancer and industrial accidents at age 58. And having terrible standards of living. And it's not that. And anyway, it's a more multi-ethnic society than the United States. What are you talking about? But it exists in their brain, and it becomes then this point of fantasy and critique of their own society. So I think it is driven by unpatriotism, by a lack of pride in what their own societies have accomplished. And just like the communists of the 30s, they create an imaginary paradise somewhere else. But that, as we saw in the 1930s, that fantasy can lead people from disaffection to disloyalty. And in the 1930s, we saw it led some to outright treason. Yeah. And the dangers are there in the 2020s of a repetition on the other side of the ideological spectrum of the same pattern, disaffection to disloyalty. And what we are seeing from the Trump administration is so questionable as to raise the fear that history is repeating itself in its fullest dimension 90 years later.
Yeah.
The actual journey of helping your hair, it is a lot easier than you'd think.
Hims definitely worked.
I didn't expect so much hair to come back.
I went to the Hims website. Within 10 minutes, I was talking to a provider.
I started to see results in the first 2 to 3 months. Even when I'm running and my hair is sweaty, I do not have to worry about what it looks like.
They don't have a white shiny spot anymore. Start today at hims.com.
Let's come back to the European delegation for a moment and what the meetings and might tell us about America's broader relationship to the world. There's been a lot of reporting, as you know, about how the European leaders essentially adapted their language to suit Trump, including the talking of deals and tariffs and all the rest. What do you make of them speaking in Trump's idiom? Well,
Europe reinventing itself as a military power is going to take a long time. And it's a difficult thing for them to do for a lot of reasons: institutional, cultural, political. And it's difficult to do without Great Britain being part of the European Union, because a lot of the force and a lot of the expeditionary force of European potential has always come from Great Britain, which has that tradition, even though it's sadly weakened in recent years. So they need to keep America in the game. And they have also learned that the one thing that may work on Trump to restrain him from going all the way down the Putin highway is flattery. So they flatter him. Their institutions, unfortunately, well, fortunately for them, and but unfortunately for Ukraine, don't allow the one thing that really does work with Trump, which is flattery plus bribes. They can't bribe, but they can flatter him, and so that's what they're doing. But they have to be thinking very hard about reinventing Europe in a way that it is strategically independent from the United States. Now, it needs to be said, this is a tremendous loss. So much of Canadian foreign policy since 1945 at least, and even earlier, has been about preventing that from ever happening, keeping the two halves of the Atlantic soldered tightly together. If Canada's had one supreme foreign policy mission, that has been it. But if that mission is a failure because the Americans won't cooperate anymore, Europe needs the capability to defend itself, and that means greater unity and cohesion.
In that vein, if one were to steelman the Trump argument, it may sound something like this: the administration's use of leverage and its asymmetrical power vis-a-vis the Europeans has led both to a trade deal on favorable terms for America, and Europe assuming greater responsibility for its own defense. What would you say to that argument? Why is it wrong, or what does it miss?
Well, you use the word steelman, and maybe not everyone who listens is familiar with this term. And I don't know the exact origin, but from a certain kind of, there's a certain kind of school of logic that says a steelman is the opposite of a straw man. It's taking your opponent's argument and giving it in its strongest form. But one of the things I would say, one of the problems with steelmanning is it tends to turn into hallucination. So you can always create. So why did the husband strike his wife in the face? Well, there's a lot of evidence that vigorous stroking of the cheeks can stimulate an immune response and a healthier complexion. So that is the steelman argument. It's just lunatic. It's not what's going on. So yes, you can make up fantasy arguments for why Trump is doing what he's doing. And there are people at some of the think tanks in Washington that try to straddle the line between Trump and Republicanism as it used to be. There's a lively industry of creating these steelman arguments, but they just don't respond to anything that's real. I mean, Trump.
Hello, my name is George Dienhardt. Welcome to Politics on the Prairie. We have a great guest today, congressional candidate John Kitover. How are you doing today, John?
George, I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing real good too. I see you got the whole campaign, the headquarters going there.
I do. I've got a lot of fun.
Hello, my name is George Dienhardt. Welcome to Politics on the Prairie. We have a great guest today, congressional candidate John Kitover. How are you doing today, John?
George, I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing real good too. I see you got the whole campaign, the headquarters going there.
I do. I've got a lot of phones set up. I've got a lot of YouTubes going, Instagrams, X accounts, Clubhouse. I try to do a lot of mass communication for the campaign at home.
I see you got the whole campaign, the headquarters going there.
I do. I've got a lot of phones set up.
Oh, my name is George Dienhardt. Welcome to Politics.
Oh, good, appreciate it.
I've got a lot of YouTubes going, Instagrams, X accounts, Clubhouse. I try to do a lot of mass communication for the campaign at home.
I saw that. That's how you got on my radar. It was all social media. You're probably way better connected in that aspect than your opponent, fellow Hood. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in Chicago, 42 years old, and I'm a graduate of the Citadel in